We want to go right to Brandy Cruz, who's on the phone. And Brandy, you are seeing it from a different perspective. So what are you seeing out there right now?
Yeah. Well, I want to go through for you guys just what the last 10 minutes entails for our crew, because I think it gives an idea of how hostile things are out here. We were on the same block where that SPD car was being vandalized, and when it was lit on fire, we decided we were going to back up a little bit. When we did, we got onto a secondary block, and there were 3 more SPD vehicles lined up. But I've got a crowd running towards me. I'm going to run and talk to you, okay? I'm going to run and talk. When we got to those SPD vehicles, I'm not sure what people are running from, but I don't want to get trampled. When we saw those SPD vehicles, people started vandalizing them. And one of the protesters actually broke out a window and took out an AR-15. A police-assigned AR-15 from an SPD cruiser. They then proceeded to open fire with the gun into the SPD cruiser. So at that time, we had I'm going to be full of disclosure here. We had a security guard assigned to our crew who decided that for public safety, he was going to disarm and take this gun that this rioter had just taken and was firing. So he took the AR-15, he has a military background, disassembled it, and we called 911 immediately. Because obviously at that point, the job of reporting is secondary when you have someone firing a firearm.
You can see someone had an axe and they kept slamming into this. I'm gonna go around the corner because there's another vehicle that they are now. This is a King County Metro building. You can see people on top of it, smashing it in, using some kind of device to break it. People bashing in different vehicles. Again, on the other side, that vehicle is still on fire. We had, for a brief moment, those flashing lights of law enforcement coming down the street. I'm going to step away. Can you make sure that Mike is okay? Okay, good.
AJ, we want to make sure that you guys are safe because things are escalating. Are you guys okay out there?
We have security with us, Hannah. In this situation, we're surrounded by people, but we do have security who are with us. Now look, I want to show you guys, as I have a little bit more of a chance. Mike, you're fine where you are, because I'm going to... So here is that unit that was coming down the street. You hear the sirens and you can see them coming. Now I want to show you right here on Pike. You saw it yourselves. Hundreds of people now gone, but still that car still on fire. The smoke, the black clouds of smoke billowing up into the sky. But there are people who are taking selfies in front of it, taking pictures in front of it. The continued sound of the smashed windshields as these people have now made their way into this King County vehicle that has a lights on top of it. Here's someone that's driving down the street in front of what was those members of law enforcement. These are people driving down the street. There are people on skateboards. This is, the only word for it is chaos. Everywhere you look are people running around. Cars are on fire. People are breaking into buildings. Everywhere you look, people have handfuls of goods that they've looted. Fireworks being shot off in the street. The only way to describe this right now is just lawlessness. Again, just one block away though is law enforcement. You can see how far they are from what's going on. Stopped. Here we are, one block away in what, again, can only be described as chaos. You can see the smoke, you can see the fire from 2 of these buildings across the street. Firefighters are putting out one of the fires as there's still hundreds of people still out. Now we're walking with law enforcement surrounded by hundreds of people as they're making their way through 4th. Behind them is a car that is fully engulfed As you were mentioning, David and Hannah, that is that King County Metro Transit. So what happens though now, as these officers are making their way through this area, the crowds are able to disperse to other parts of the city. This is the largest amount of police that I've seen downtown throughout the entire day. Even during the original protest, there was a line of officers who were there, but they did not number this amount. We're looking at least 100 officers who are coming down Pike, and as they make their way down, the crowds are making their way through different parts of downtown. The numbers of folks who were here earlier have now gone down by a lot, but that doesn't mean that they're leaving. They're just moving to different parts of the city. Earlier when we were out here, I heard one of the people say, make sure you have your exit strategy planned because they're flanking us. So these people are planning where they're gonna go as officers are able to get to them. Again, we're being surrounded by what is at least 100 officers. Heads up, heads up, heads up. Look, right here, right here. Do you see this shot right here, the King County Sheriff? There.
I can't hear you. I gotta go.
All right, so there. Can we just take cover right? We're gonna take cover right here. Yes, yes, yes. All right, guys, we're gonna head out of here because this is some gas, and it's starting to affect us, how we can breathe, how we can speak. So we're gonna make our way back to
Let's bring in Matt Lorch now, who's been looking back at some of the events from earlier in the day to bring us some of the video and the other moments that you may have missed if you just joined us. Hey, Matt.
Hey, David. A big difference from what you were talking about with WTO and what's going on now. This has been playing out across the country. We have watched these sorts of protests play out in other cities. Last night it came to Seattle, and right now we have a city under siege. So let's show you some video from earlier today, walk you through a few events of the day as we've been watching this video come in to our newsroom, and we have seen just scenes that make your jaw drop. The mayor talked about this, how many city police cars, patrol cars have been the target of these protests. Here you see protesters bashing out windows. They spray painted this patrol car. And here, this was very similar to the scene that we just saw with AJ Janavel as people were kicking out windows, bashing in patrol cars. The mayor saying earlier during her news conference that several patrol cars were lit on fire. And this was a scene like any other most of us have ever witnessed. This is when the protest, right around 4 o'clock, moved onto Interstate 5. Washed Out sent out a tweet saying, stay off the interstate, it is not safe. And you see hundreds of marchers on the interstate while cars are driving by. You can understand the danger involved in that. If cars don't see protesters, a really dangerous situation. And we have danger going on throughout the city right now. This was a scene shot by our crew. AJ Janavel was right there. This is at the Old Navy at Westlake Plaza. And this happened to many businesses down there. Targets, people targeting retailers, breaking out storefronts, then going in, grabbing what they can, starting fires. We saw looting at this Old Navy location. There was looting at the Nordstrom. We saw more looting at the Banana Republic.
And here, a reminder of the reason we were supposed to be here this evening. A reminder of the reason everybody was supposed to come out. Just thrown away, like all of this out here. So again, we have a couple things actively happening. You have active looting. Oh, here, and we have riot officers kind of advancing a little bit, so we're going to give them space again to work. You have the looting, you have the fire, and the riot officers trying to give SFD the space they need to operate. That's crucial. And then the most active area of the protest earlier was down here. And nothing over there anymore. Now you've really had people splinter off sort of in every direction. And so now SPD trying to come in and deal with these situations as they arise.
So Brandy, you know, we were talking earlier about how things look like it was escalating. Where you are right now, I don't see a huge crowd, but it appears as though there's still chaos out there, and you see some people walking up right now. I don't know what that's about. Can you tell us what's going on right there, Brandy?
Yeah, so this is just riot officers with SPD, but I don't know. Yeah, these protesters just giving them a hard time walking with them, and you can see that. Let's just go in there. Okay, here we go. Let's zoom in. And now you have rioters here. Protect his back. Get his back. Oh, hold on.
Oh.
Okay, now we're all right. So what you're hearing is basically a police dispersal tactic. So it's, I don't know if it's a flashbang.
Brandy,
but essentially the police are throwing those.
Yes, move out of that area.
Okay?
Yes, please move out of that area. We just want to make sure you're safe first and foremost.
Yeah, and Frank, just pause right there because I don't want you to trip over this. So I'm going to have our security, you get the camera, just make sure he doesn't trip. And Hannah, I will continue to explain to you what's going on. So what happened is the riot officers were advancing down the street. There was a group of protesters in front of them who wouldn't move. And so they basically made the riot officers push them along. And then there was a little confrontation where one of the protesters turned around, and then the riot officers tried to effect an arrest. So at that point, all the other protesters started to rush toward to help that rioter. And that's when what you see there, what I believe it is, I can't be 100% sure, is a canister, what do you call it? A CS gas. So basically they hurl them down, or sometimes they shoot them out. And it's a crowd dispersal method. Not only you don't want to be by the explosion of it, but then the aftermath of it with the gas is what you don't want to be by.
And protesters moved in and they just started breaking out these windows and started smashing on the car. And that's what we saw a little bit later in AJ's live shot. There was a county vehicle and a bunch of people just jumped on the hood of the county vehicle and they started bashing out the windshield. David, I've got a question for you. Obviously, our city has become better equipped to handle these unruly protests. And we saw it was really bad like 6 years ago, if you remember, on May Day. And there was damage to Nike Town and other businesses throughout downtown Seattle, and they came back with a new action plan the next year. They used the bikes to control the crowds. They would disperse the crowds, and damage was way down. Injuries were way down after that. It seemed like we had the blueprint for success. Do you think we were just caught off guard by the number of people and the amount of rage involved with this one?
There's no question we were caught off guard. There's no question they did not prepare for this. They're calling in for mutual aid right now, calling in the National Guard. This was not a larger crowd than what we've dealt with in the past. You're right, Matt. And they're very, very good at using those bicycles to contain unruly crowds. We had a lot of craziness back then, and they were able to figure out the tactics, so much so that other law enforcement agencies from around the country came to Seattle to train with Seattle police on how they controlled crowds. They were not in place tonight. They did not have enough people, and I think they were surprised, and now we're seeing the damage. And I think part of that also is there is a concern about the meaning behind these protests. They understand the anger that people have over what happened to George Floyd in Minneapolis. But at the same time, you have to protect property. You have to protect people. You cannot let lawlessness go out of control, which is what we saw today. Let's go back out to AJ Janavel, who's been front line of all of it today. AJ?
Okay. David, we're still at 5th and Union, and what's interesting is when we were standing here about 15 minutes ago, there was no scene here, and just in the last 5 minutes, the situation has changed. There's a series of officers who are making their way up 5th Avenue, getting toward where that fire engines were earlier. I want to make sure that we're good. Okay, we're going to get in front of these guys because we don't want to get blocked by them. So we're following these officers up 5th. I would say there's about 24 of them making their way. Again, the scenes are so rapidly changing as we're making our way up 5th. Where we were standing 10 minutes ago, there was nobody. There was nobody at that block, and now the officers are making their way through. When we left the block, there was one person who was yelling at police. It was just one person, though. We've seen the numbers, at least in our area, drop down. And by our area, I mean the specific block and intersection. Because throughout this afternoon, I have seen how fast one group can move to another location. So we are at University Street and 5th, where that fire presence was earlier. I'm looking around to see what, if anything specific, they had been working toward. I don't see anything that stands out. Specifically, we are just following along with those officers who are just about 50 feet from where we're standing, but as we're moving in the direction that they're moving, we are not seeing anything on this street. One thing that I do see is, Mike, if you don't mind, could you do me a big favor and just kind of show? I want to make sure there's nothing specific that's too offensive, but here on 5th Avenue, just graffiti all over these buildings. I want to make sure that the camera movement's not too jarring because I'm seeing so much. There is a window. Can we just stand back away from them? If we're away from them, we're going to try to let these officers go past us. That business across the street, it appears that the windows have been smashed. Right where those folks are standing right now, you can see graffiti on that building. There's a person that's running past dozens of officers who has a handful of clothes still with tags and hangers on. And those.
What I've noticed is there are lots of retail items that I've seen on the ground, and they still have tags on them, or they have security codes on, you know, the little security tags. Lots of that happening in Westlake Park, all kinds of clothing scattered all over Westlake Park. So you can tell it's the clear remnants of looting.
Well, it is a sad situation, and you have to feel that some of the people doing that are aware that they're not booking people into jail on property crimes right now, and criminals know that, or people prone to criminal behavior know that because of the pandemic right now, and it all contributes to this chaos that we're experiencing tonight. The mayor's saying they're going to hold people accountable eventually. We'll have to see whether that actually happens.
We did hear, as I mentioned earlier this evening, from the mayor, who talked about how the city is responding. She signed several proclamations, one of those being a curfew that went into effect at 5 o'clock tonight. Another one allowing police to arrest anyone who has anything that could be deemed as a weapon, a pole, anything that could be used as a weapon. Obviously, police were targeted earlier with projectiles. Do we have that sound with the mayor of Seattle? If we could, I'd like to go to it. She talked about who was actually protesting today. Go ahead and take a listen.
It is clear that there was a large number of people who came to protest peacefully, that organizers like Andre Taylor and others were able to speak. The crowd was able to march, and they maintained themselves very peacefully. Earlier in the day, we had some marchers who were also peaceful, but then we had many thousands of people flow into downtown who obviously were coming primarily for destruction. And very rapidly, the amount of destruction escalated, and the situation deteriorated quickly, even for the people who came peacefully. I also want to say that I've heard from others, and there were some interviewed on the news that you will have seen, that they did come to demonstrate peacefully, and they themselves feel it was wrong for their events to be hijacked by others and take away the force of their voice by having this end in such destruction and chaos and injury to people.
It's getting later in the evening, and it seems like things are getting quieter in the city. Mike, I want to see if maybe you can turn up the street to show exactly what's happening, as what it seems like a lot of these members of law enforcement are returning to this precinct. But even if the night is over, the violence, the aggression, the looting, everything that we've seen, even if that is over, there is so much left to deal with in downtown Seattle. There is buildings that are destroyed. There is businesses that have been broken into, the people that own those businesses sitting at home watching as their livelihoods are broken into after what's already been months of difficulties during this pandemic that we've been dealing with. So many questions remain, and so many other people's lives have been impacted with what is going on tonight. We're going to continue to work to get answers, but being down here through all of this, hearing Brandy's words, talking about hours of just lawlessness. There's really no other words to describe what was happening.